Well, hello and thank you for joining me for another Alex on Tech and ITY TV interview. I'm joined today by Sanjay Galal. He is the CFO at Syspro. Welcome to the program.
Thanks, Alex. Thanks for having me.
Now, Sanjay, Syspro started in 1978, which is 43 years ago. So what did Syspro start by offering over 4 decades ago? And what products and services has that evolved into today, just a few weeks away from 2022?
So that's a great question, Alex. So I think in 1978 we started, and the first product was basically a DOS-based piece of software which could do very little. It was known as Impact at that point. And it's evolved over the last 4 decades into a fully blown enterprise resource planning solution specified towards manufacturing distribution. And with a whole bunch of rich functionality built on a single code base. So that's roughly a summary of where we were and where we've come to.
Sure.
In fact, if I could just unpack that a bit more, just to
Please.
give you a bit more insight. Today we've got the web browser, mobile app, and then we've got that deployment method on different solutions, such as either on-premise, hosted, private cloud, or public. So it's evolved quite a bit. And in 2022, we release a new version, but maybe I'll catch you again next year and we can unpack that a bit more.
Sure. Now, Syspro talks about unleashing the power of Industry 4.0. So what is the definition of Industry 4.0 today? And also, just by, I don't know if it's coincidence or by design, but earlier today, as we're filming this interview, Syspro launched a survey called CFO 4.0. So tell us about Industry 4.0 and CFO 4.0 and what some of the findings were.
Okay, perfect. So let's start with the first one, being Industry 4.0. So for me, it's basically pointing to an accelerated change. We define Industry 4.0 as encompassing the technology, people, processes, and the interconnectivity between devices and all of those aspects. So then that comes together basically to bring about accelerated change, which I mentioned already. So that's how I define it, simply put, in terms of Industry 4.0. Mm-hmm. And effectively, just to add to that, AI and machine learning are those buzzwords or terms that a lot of people are using. Mm-hmm. These are key aspects that are coming to the fore through Industry 4.0. Effectively, what it's doing in my mind, one of the things that it's doing is taking away the repeatable tasks and basically allowing humans to maybe apply their minds, etc., to make qualified decisions and add true value. So man working with machine almost to get vastly improved outcomes. That's how I see it. Then you mentioned the CFO 4.0 initiative that we launched. Funny enough, you mentioned that just last night we ran the global CFO 4.0 webinar to all our regions, customers, prospects, etc. And basically what came out of CFO 4.0 is that there were 3 definitive outcomes. The first one being a lot of businesses have diversified, so diversification being key. Investment in smart technology is the second one. And the third one, which is quite interesting, which I'm sure you want me to unpack a bit later, is how the CFO's role has changed and how it's evolved and how it's accelerated itself. So that was a basis for running the survey. There's a much more detail to go through there, but in a nutshell, that's what CFO 4.0 was about.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I'll link to that information and have that with the article that accompanies this video. But how does Industry 4.0 and CFO 4.0 and Syspro help the CFOs of manufacturers with manufacturing products to meet endless global demand, such a fundamentally important part of modern life today?
Yep, good question. So let's take an example of smart automation, just to explain that a bit further. If a factory or a warehouse adopted this technology, say, and provided optimization and efficiency that it requires, CFOs are then able to leverage off that, get a visible view of that information all in one place, and then effectively make better decisions for the business. So, on top of that, we look at a couple of things that are important for manufacturing CFOs. So key things are like cash flows, margin management, inventory holdings, high manufacturing costs, and the visibility across the stack is pretty critical. So collaboration with the warehousing lead enables us to actually provide more value add to the business itself, as well as the individual function, and then add value as the modern CFO. The reason why I mention that is because this is important because it's scalable. If you're investing in smart technology, you're making the leap and you're automating a lot of what your warehouse used to do, and getting people focusing on the new or deploy them into new roles where they can apply their minds, as I mentioned earlier. You're basically setting up a foundation from which you can scale. Now that talks to your previous point of saying, how do we keep up with high demand, high volumes, instant gratification that is the world today, and this is what this allows. Smart technology investment, etc., can take you to that level where you can invest, get a foundation in place, and then scale with your customers, scale with the demand, and make sure that you actually penetrate market and carve out more market share for yourselves. Yeah, just another example for you, from a finance or manufacturing finance mix perspective, in terms of an example of how we could use this technology. If we implemented AI or machine learning in the accounts receivable, accounts payable type of function, you could redeploy that person to actually do other functions which would be more value added, and a bot can be implemented basically to take care of AR, AP, and deal with customers, because they already know what the behavior of that customer is. So why get a human to do repeatable tasks when your machine can do that? So there's just an example of the power of adoption and what it can do for you in simplistic form.
Yeah, I mean, without I was going to say, without all of this, these modern ERP systems, and without the CFO being able to sort of have a dashboard that gives this overview that they can drill down to in ways that they never could see with such granular detail before. I mean, the modern world as we know it, the just-in-time nature of things, it just wouldn't be possible.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
And also, I mean, you've seen the supply chain issues that we've had, which I'm sure you're going to ask me about across, I mean, the trade war with China, people waiting months, etc., to get stock, etc. Maybe I'll touch on something for you which might interest you, and that comes out of the CFO 4.0 seminar again last week, or webinar, last night, sorry. We had one of our customers effectively going out to market, stockpiling and paying a premium for raw materials, etc., in order to service their customers. And taking the hit on that. So taking a hit on margin, taking a hit on profitability, but saw the value of the medium to long-term effect of that in terms of retaining the customers and fulfilling to their customers. So that's just a real example again of how this, businesses can innovate and take advantage of a crisis such as what we've had.
Yeah, and look, one of the things you spoke about before was manufacturers being able to diversify their products, offerings and services to take full advantage of the upcoming recovery. But, factories aren't cheap to build or to retool. We see Intel spending or about to spend tens of billions of dollars to build hyper-advanced chip fabs in the US, I guess taking away some of the risk of having all your eggs in one manufacturing basket. And, factories in China, of course, are ubiquitous, with factories being built in various other countries to diversify the base of manufacturing capability. So, obviously, it's like trying to turn a ship on a dime. It takes a long time. So clearly, your software and your ERP technologies can help to mitigate some of that. But what is the situation for manufacturers today who want to change and cover more bases?
Yeah, so we've seen with some of our customers, whether they're big, small, medium, large, whatever it is, they've taken initiative to invest early. They've seen this more as an opportunistic type of environment, rather than one going back into your shell and sort of going into maintenance mode. So what they've done in a situation like that is actually invest up front, invest in the technology, like an ERP backbone, and then basically build all your other solutions around that, because that's how we see our ERP and our product specifically. We see it as the backbone. So I'll give you an example. One of our customers, two of them actually, Rode Microphones, AF Cason, what they've done is they've built solutions for their customers around the ERP system, so that they have minimal involvement with them from an auditing and an engagement perspective, so that it's just all seamless. And that's just one small aspect of bolting onto our product in order to get these efficiencies out and fulfilling demand. Again, just to answer some of your other questions, taking advantage of the recovery actually, puts you ahead and puts you ahead 2, 3, 4, 5-fold, which companies don't realize. So a lot of companies have realized this, especially in the manufacturing industry, and have adopted the technology in order to accelerate that change, which COVID has brought about, right? We can't deny that. So a lot of our businesses using our product have been opportunistic on that front.
Yeah, well, I mean that sort of answers what my next question was how investments in advanced technologies have kept Australian and global manufacturing and distribution businesses on course over the past 2 years. I mean, Rode microphones, I'm a big fan of their technologies, and I'm glad to hear that they're a customer of yours. But you're talking also about that investment in ERP, and this must be for some companies like upgrading to a whole new ERP system, which in this case is yours, from what must have been advanced technology, I don't know, 10 years ago, but now has been completely superseded by what you have today.
Yep. So a lot of businesses we see, effectively when they do an ERP purchase, it's a 5, 7, 10-year cycle, and then you're stuck with the investment. So that's typically the cycle, but we're seeing that now that's shifting. If they see that the value is being brought onto the table, they actually go with the product earlier than when they should be decommissioning their previous products. So it's all about the rich functionality, the purpose it serves, and what we can provide to the customer. In terms of our product, we've got MES built in, so manufacturing piece which caters specifically for manufacturing operations management. And effectively what we found, just to link in with that, and you spoke about the webinar last night, we found that 65% of our respondents on that survey actually diversified and innovated and spent and wanted to spend. So that's quite a big number given the number of respondents. So I think, most of them have diversified into other markets, other product lines, etc. So yeah, pretty good point, and that's how I'd explain it from my perspective.
Yeah, it only makes sense to have multiple income streams. But also, I'm sure the answer to this question is going to depend. Every customer is different. But how long does it take for a manufacturer to implement Syspro ERP? Are they sort of running both the old and new system in parallel until the whole new one is installed? What's the short version of what a company might expect if they come to you and say, "Help us to implement this new system"?
So again, it's customer dependent, as you mentioned. So it depends how mature the customer is. Again, earlier you mentioned going from no system or a rudimentary system to now a fully blown ERP, which is quite a big step. So we've seen typically the cycles of implementation is 9 months to even 2 years, depending on the complexity of the customer. So the large sites, I mean, we typically between 12 and 18, maybe 24 months maximum, to make sure that we bring the value, and then they want to go further and integrate other third-party products, etc., to build a fully robust solution. So yeah, that's typical for big customer. But smaller customers or small to medium size or mid-corporate type of customers, you're looking at 6 to 12 months with a fully integrated solution. So yeah, that's the value proposition we push, Alex.
Sure. And are there any other local or global customers that you'd like to highlight?
Yeah, so I mentioned a couple of them already. Glad to know that you're a fan of Rode microphones. They're doing some fantastic stuff out there in the market. They, like I said, I'll go through each of these customers, just give you a taste of what each of them have done in this space. So if you look at Rode microphones, they've, like I said, optimized, they've stockpiled, they're using our tool with their customers, etc. Another customer is AFKson, which is, they also basically invested up front. They were cash flush. They planned for the future, and they took advantage of the gap. And they're one of our other customers. Locally, we have BNR Enclosures, which is in Metal Fab out in Queensland. Quite a big customer. They've actually got robotics, etc., on their shop floor. So they've automated that in that way. Then we've got again, AFKson, just to go back to AFKson, they've actually implemented the manufacturing piece that I said to you, which was a fully blown internal system that helps them with stock ordering and every single aspect of the inventory cycle. Then we've got, who else do we have? We've got Nelson Irrigation, which is in industrial machinery and equipment. They use Cispro. Perfect Potions, which is in pharma and natural therapeutics. So we've got a number, and Juice and Co, for example, they're in food and bev. So we've got a number of local customers. I can't mention them all, but those are some of the local customers that I can mention. And then globally, we've got Norman Goodfellows, who's a spirits and wines distribution and retail business, which runs Cispro. And then we've got BKB, which is actually a livestock type of business where they actually manage their sheep from basically each part of the process, counting them, making sure the outputs are optimal, etc. So you've got a wonderful bunch of diverse type of businesses in different verticals. And just some of them I mentioned there to try and give you an idea of the spectrum of what we're dealing with.
Yeah. Now, one of the things that we're seeing manufacturing CFOs doing is taking on the dual roles of financial decision maker and business navigator. So what's your commentary around that?
Yeah, so that's interesting. I said earlier today in another call that the role's already evolved. It's evolving so fast that we've had to wear multiple hats. So effectively, we're no longer just the custodians of finance. We've got to look after. We've got to almost have a crystal ball to say to the CEO and the MD of a business to say where we're going, what we need to build out for them in terms of scenario analysis, where we want to take the business, etc. And then on the other side of the coin, we need to be the masters of each function. So when you talk about warehousing, people, which is looking after your people, which is critical in this pandemic, looking after their well-being. Stock we've mentioned already. So you've got to wear multiple hats and make sure you're on top of the board, you're skilled up, and you can add value across these multiple functions. Otherwise, you're just, the run-of-the-mill finance guy or girl. So, that's how we've seen it evolve. So we've truly become two ICs to the leaders of the business now, and a lot more reliance has been placed on us to take the businesses forward.
And I guess, given all the COVID pandemic disruptions, it's no surprise to see supply chain headaches such as the procurement of raw materials and inventory being the leading business disruptor of this sector. And you even mentioned some of your clients took advantage of this to, even at a premium, buy up so they could stay a reliable partner for their customers, even though it cost them extra. They didn't want to lose that business.
Yeah, so that's a really good point. So if you look at those headaches, etc., I mean, in manufacturing specifically, aspects such as inventory holding, warehousing, input costs, all place pressure on margins and profitability, right? So everyone's looking for that gap or looking to optimize. But these headaches that have been created actually result in the erosion of those two elements, being margin and profitability. So, this has to be or remains at the front of mind. And this is where innovation and adoption of technology and investment spend pretty much change the game, Alex. So that's what we're seeing, and that's why we're seeing our roles change, specifically in manufacturing.
And I guess with the need or the desire to diversify, we're also seeing this race to reskill becoming an urgent path towards continued profitability for Australian manufacturers. They've got to reskill themselves and reskill their staff.
Yeah. So reskilling and also the war for talent, you've heard that a lot now across social media and everywhere. That's pretty much linked in my view. But if we talk about reskilling specifically, I mean, I think, as I mentioned earlier, with AI and technology, you can actually take your existing staff complement and you can reskill them and redeploy them in specific areas while you use the technology to deal with other areas. So I think that's a natural evolution. As we've heard across media and LinkedIn and wherever else we look and everything we read, some roles are going to become redundant in the future and other roles are going to emerge out of that as well. So I think from an employer perspective, I think to retain staff, retain your talent, reskilling is necessary. But on the flip side of that, I mean, things have just evolved and accelerated again so much that it's been a necessity. So that's my take on that, yeah.
Yeah, and if you don't reskill your staff, they'll leave and someone else will reskill them against you.
Exactly. And then the constraints become worse, So what do you do then? Unless you can get machines to do what they're going to do, then it's a different story. But if not, you need decision makers and you need operators. You need people to do that. You better make sure that your staff are, skilled, and you're empowering them, you're supporting them, and you're taking them along a journey. So, very important point you make.
Yeah. Now, before I move on to some questions about your own personal journey in the world of tech, is there anything else about CISPRO that I haven't asked that we should know about?
Just a quick point from my side. I think, Alex, we've covered most of it, but I think from a CISPRO perspective, the differentiator is specializing in manufacturing and distribution. And again, it links back to the webinar, the CFO 4.0 findings we had last night, and we're going to run. And there were some interesting findings in there that you should all have a look at. So feel free to download the ebook, and we'll distribute that across.
Yeah, well, as I said, I'll have the link to that in the article that accompanies this video. But look, as we do get towards the end of the interview, I always like to ask, what is your memory of, or what is a memory you'd like to share of your first computer?
Wow. Okay. So I think it was 1987. IBM released their PC, and I was lucky enough that my uncle, who used to work for IBM back in South Africa, managed to arrange one for me. And I remember I had a 386 PC at that point with a VGA monitor, which was apparently the big
It was cool
instead of a monochrome.
Yeah, 256
exactly.
colors.
Exactly. So, and then it was 512 as well. It came out shortly after that. So, the excitement for me was running DOS and Windows 3.1, and even more exciting was playing the Formula One Grand Prix game on that VGA monitor. So that's my memories of running a PC back then. But those were fun times.
Yeah, absolutely. And what is a bit about your own history in the world of tech?
Oh, okay, so that's an interesting question. I mean, I always had an interest in technology and finance, funny enough, and how they sort of cross-pollinated. So, after I finished school, deciding what to do and deciding what not to do, almost like a process of elimination, I decided that this finance tech thing was what I wanted to do. So I studied both, and I'm qualified in both. So I thought it would create a niche for me going forward. And I've been lucky enough to work with companies like EY, Dow Financial Services, AECI, which is a large chemical and mining listed global company, Walmart's business in South Africa as well, and now CISPRO, a global software provider. So I've kept that technology thread going, and I'm really passionate about how all of that can work together. And I'm really lucky to be in this space because it's evolving at 1,000,000 miles an hour. And you always feel like you're behind, So that's my take on it and my background on it.
In technology, it's never Groundhog Day. It's always something different and exciting. Now, exactly. from the past to the future, how do you see CISPRO evolving over the next couple of years? But then what might the industry look like in the 2030s? I mean, we hear about, in the future, you'll have these super advanced 3D printers that will change manufacturing, put the manufacturing plant right in your home or office. And then, of course, you have these Star Trek atomic replicators where they can create anything out of the atoms that are just floating around there, and which would, if that ever becomes true, and possibly not in our lifetimes, but would completely disrupt manufacturing as we know it.
Yeah, so again, going back to the research we did, I mean, one trend we saw was that the US and UK, for example, they're investing in major smart tech and robotics already. Whereas, as you mentioned in one of the early questions, why we've been, from an APAC perspective, why we've been behind the curve. So I think everyone will be adopting these things, but in the next 10 years, I foresee that will follow suit, and basically the investment will match the narrative because everyone's talking about it, but I think it's going to happen quite quickly. And this important point to make here, Alex, is not only for large business. This is going to be to every single business, whether you're a one-man show or a multinational global business. The technology is going to be accessible to everyone. Doesn't matter your size or complexity. So I think that's the way it's going. And I think that's the way CISPRO has been set up to cater for that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we went from Gutenberg to the printer in 500 years. 3D printers have come a long way in a short time. I've seen these videos a few years ago of these 3D printers that could print sort of buildings, in China. Yeah. But I mean, still very primitive compared to what they show on Star Trek. And exactly. But technology is moving very fast. But Sanjay, what is the best piece of advice that you've ever received to help you get where you are today?
Okay, so I've got two of them. One's more personal. So my folks always told me, never compare yourself. Always remain yourself, remain true to yourself. So that was one valuable lesson I've learned, and I've taken on throughout my career. I've had some senior roles early on in my career up to now, so that's really helped me. And also another interesting thing which I go by is comparison is the thief of joy. And that was by Theodore Roosevelt. So he said, comparison is the thief of joy. And that rings true with me. And it's just linked to what my folks always said. The other thing is for me, being humble. I've been called an egoless leader. And I think that sums it up really. I'm always about what the purpose is, how I can lead by doing, etc. So I always believe lead by doing, and the rest will follow.
Yeah, excellent. So what is your final message to IT Wire viewers and readers, and to your current and future customers and partners?
Thanks, Alex. So I'll make reference again to the CFO 4.0 webinar.
Please, yeah.
I think we've innovated in that space, and I think the message for me is three things. Firstly, the technology automation piece is critical for every business out there, regardless of size. Diversification into new product lines or new markets is the second thing that we took out, that we saw a lot of businesses going to. And the last thing is your CFO and the role of your CFO and how it's evolved. Those are the three things that came out. And that would be my message to prospects, existing customers, etc. As they say, Alex, never waste a good crisis, and that's a tagline we've used in this initiative, because I believe it's so appropriate at this point in time in the current environment. And then lastly, just remember, ERP is the backbone of businesses advancing no matter where you are in the cycle. So just keep that in mind, and we hope to help you wherever you are in your journey. And thanks for your time, Alex.
Well, thank you very much. Yeah, I mean, it's going to be an interesting journey to get from Industry 4.0 and CFO 4.0 to Industry 5.0 and CFO 5.0. Probably take quite a few years yet, but the journey is definitely underway. I'm glad that there's a company like CISPRO helping the manufacturers of the world bring the products and services that we all love to market, even though we're facing some of these challenges. So Sanjay Galal, CFO at CISPRO, thank you very much for your time, and I do hope we can speak again.
Thanks, Alex. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Cheers, man.